Hey guys, my name is Francois. I am CEO of Hybrid Power Solutions, and today we're going to be taking a look at the most common issues and how to resolve them, so troubleshooting on the power tower. Let's get right into it. So first thing I'm going to do is actually remove jewelry. If you've got any rings especially, those are really bad traps for actually short circuiting. So make sure you take off all your jewelry when you're doing any troubleshooting work. So the first thing you're going to want to do is actually turn off the unit using the main power button. This is the one on the outside of the power tower. Now, if your screen does not turn off, that's because you have your button right underneath the inverter on as well. We always recommend that you only use the external button and that you keep the internal button in the off position. That'll mean that this way you won't have to actually open up the cabinet to turn the unit on and off. Now, the only other reason to use the button that's located underneath the inverter is if you're using power saver mode. That's available on our 120 volt units, and we'll talk about that. So the first thing I do when I see some form of problem on the power tower is I always check the breaker. The most common place for these breakers to go or to trip is going to be on your output or on your input from your generator. And the reason for that is because you may have just pulled too much at any point in time, and that's actually blown a breaker, tripped a breaker, I like to say, on one of these things. So let's take a look at all the breakers that you're going to be wanting to check. So I like to start bottom to top, so let's do that. On bottom here, depending on the version you will have 1 or 2 independent breakers. The little 30 amp breakers, you just want to make sure that they're pushed all the way in. So press that button in. If you see it popped out, that's likely the issue that you had. Solar breakers on the right here, so you're going to see a red and a white lever. These two you're going to want to check, make sure they're in the on position. Obviously this is if you're having issues. Everything's off right now. You've got another 2 sets of breakers underneath here, which is your input and output. Check that those haven't tripped either. Now the really sneaky one in this one that people commonly forget is you've got one additional breaker on the 240 volt unit right above here, so right at the top over here, okay? The next thing we want to check for is any kind of blown fuses or wiring that has been burnt or is not properly connected. So I'd recommend doing this in the off position. You do want to go ahead and turn everything off. For the sake of this experience, we're not going to do that. What we're going to want to do first is actually check the fuse, the DC fuse right here. There's a little peering view, a little view window on the right or left side, depending on which way your fuse is facing, and you can take a flashlight and actually see through there. It's common to see this blown, and then basically what you'll see is you won't have any kind of charging or discharging when the sun's not out. You're also going to want to check the connections on your AC and DC plugs. These can get loose. It's always best when you are installing these that you retighten and retorque down all the screws that you may see, because they do sometimes loosen off during shipment and then make bad connections. So just in the off position, checking to make sure by just gently pulling on all the wires, making sure that they're all connected properly, that there's no burn marks of any sort. Everything looks good. You don't have any kind of burnt smell coming out of any particular area. That's always something good to check for. All right, so I've gone and turned everything back on for this one, because the next thing that we see, it's quite common, is people just haven't set up their unit properly, so the settings are improperly set, or there's been an extensive period of time where the unit has been off, or for some other reason, maybe a lightning strike nearby, these settings have actually been reset. It's always something good to check when you're having issues, maybe something's not charging or discharging. You're going to want to have to check all those settings. Okay? So just to mention that I did turn it off in the initial. I actually did turn off the battery as well. I had forgotten to mention that. The battery was off and our solar array was off. So at our combiner box up here, we'd actually turned off the solar, and the breaker and the off switch on our PT5 that I'm using here for demo was in the off position as well. Now that everything's back on, it's quite simple to get to your settings. You're going to hit the config button, so the configuration button. You want to hold on that till you hear a beep. It takes about 1 second. The first setting is going to be a narrow or wide voltage threshold. You can read more about that in your manual. Typically, we just keep that to normal, other than extreme settings where we have very low quality generators. Now, to move to the next setting, which there's a total of 7, what you're going to want to do is use the horizontal select to go between settings. The vertical select is reserved for actually going to changing those settings when you're at the one you want to change. So setting number 2 is your voltage. So that's where you can change from anywhere from 200 to 240 on your 240 volt version, and from 100 to 120 volts on your 120 volt version. Setting number 3 is going to be your frequency. So on this, you're going to see 50 or 60 hertz. In North America, the standard here is 60 hertz, so you're going to want to keep it on that 60 hertz. Setting number 4 is going to be your charger on or off. So this is your AC charger or on or off. Now this is probably one of the most common issues that you see this turned off. So to turn it back on, what you want to do is you want to go and hit that vertical select button again. And make sure that you've got an arrow between your AC input, so that's your little power towers there, the tower lines, and the inverter right in the middle. Okay? So you're going to go ahead and make sure that's selected. In this case, it is perfect. We can go on to that next setting. Setting number 5. Now this is an important one. This is going to be your charge rate when connected to an AC input. So that'd be a generator or a grid. So right now we've got it set to 50, but depending on your unit, you can vary between 10 amps all the way up to 50 amps. Now, setting number 6 is a little bit of a tricky one. I recommend taking a look at the manual for a more detailed definition of what this does. For most people, what you're going to want to set this to is called AC priority mode. AC priority mode is exactly how we see it right now. You're going to have a line between your AC input and your inverter, as well as your your solar to your inverter. Please go ahead and take a look at the manual to see which one is proper for you. There are settings in here like intelligent mode, for example, which will not take in any AC input until the battery actually gets into low voltage setting. So that might be something that you see, okay, I've got my AC charger set up and it's supposed to be charging, but why? My battery's at 70%, why isn't it charging off my generator? Or why isn't it charging off my grid? Well, take a look and make sure that you're on AC priority mode and not intelligent mode. Now, change that up a little bit. If you are looking for basically just peak shaving, or where you're actually just powering all your devices off your battery and your solar first and then going on to grid, trying to save yourself some money on your utility bill, then for sure intelligent mode is the way you want to have it set up. But for most people, especially if you're off grid, you're going to want to have it in AC priority mode. Last but not least is the threshold voltage for intelligent mode. You'll have to read more about that in the manual as well to really define what it is, but as a default, leave it to 3.1 if you're unsure. Now, one of the most important steps is to hit the enter button. This will save everything, okay? But it's a temporary save. To save it in permanence, what we need to do is actually turn the inverter off, okay? You're gonna wanna turn the inverter off like it is. You don't need to turn the solar off, but you can just turn the inverter off and leave it for roughly 10 seconds and then turn it back on, and that'll help permanently save your settings. So another common question I get is, how am I overloading the system? This is a 6,000 watt inverter, and I'm seeing 40 to 50% load on, or 40 to 50% on the display here of consumption, even if I'm only running a 1,500 watt inverter or a 1,500 watt load, for example. Well, right in this setup right now, I've actually got two. I'll show you right here. I've got two 1,500 watt heaters plugged in, and you can see we're getting about 49%, which is great. I mean, that's exactly what we should be seeing. We're pulling about 3,000 watt, which is 50% of this rated output for this unit. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to turn one of these units off, and you can see what happens. It barely goes down. It's still at 47%. And now the reason for that is because it's rated at 3,000 watts per line. So this is purely for the 240 volt models that are out there. It is 3,000 watts per line. So this can cause a little bit of confusion. because essentially what it's saying is that, you know, I'm only rated for 3,000 on each line, not how much I'm actually consuming at that point in time. So this can be a little bit misleading. As I've shown you, we could be actually using double what you think you're using, but really the power tower here is actually just showing you its performance, its capacity to have more, to output more power. So something to really keep in mind. Now, if you do have that 120 volt version of this unit, not the 120/240, you're gonna have power saver mode. And what power saver mode essentially turns off the converting portion of the inverter, so that DC to AC power conversion portion, until there is a load that's connected that's over 50 watts. For some people, that may not be useful. For some people, it may be. So really remember, it's that 50 watt limit. If you've got anything over 50 watts, it will continuously turn on an inverter. Anything below that, it will actually turn it off. Last but not least, I want to talk about low voltage situations. So basically, this is a common occurrence on off-grid properties who don't have an automatic generator set up, or who do have an AGS, but the generator just failed to start, ran out of fuel, and was unattended. So when a low voltage situation occurs, what you'll see is that the inverter will start beeping at you and shut off the output to your home. This will be followed by a fault 5, basically indicating we're in critical low voltage mode. After this has occurred, and this usually takes anywhere from a few hours to a day or two, it will shut down the entire system. The entire power tower will be shut off. Now, if at any point during this process, solar does come back and charge it, it will automatically get everything back up and running, so it's not an issue. Now, where the issues do arise is if you've gotten to the stage and now your battery is also triggering a low voltage fault, which happens right after all this. If it goes and turns itself off internally, it must then be manually reset and boosted. So we want to avoid this situation at all costs by ensuring that we have an automatic generator start, or that when we are leaving, that we're turning off the power completely. You can leave solar operating. Obviously, if it's very cold, then that's a different story. You probably want to turn this thing completely off. But if it's a beautiful summer day and you're only there on weekends, it's great to actually go ahead, turn off your entire system using the button on the side, but then allowing the solar to keep charging by keeping those breakers in the on position. So there you have it. These are some of the most common issues and remedies to those problems. I hope this has helped you out. If you have any kind of question, or if you have some more comments, or anything you need any kind of help, take a look at the description below. We've got not only the contact information there, but as well as our manuals. I highly recommend you download those and you take a look at the visual representation of each setting before you give us a call. A lot of times there's a small nuance between the images, and you want to make sure that those settings are proper for your application. If not, feel free to reach out to us. We do have a chat on our website, and we do take calls anytime 9 to 5 during business hours. Thank you very much.